This is a very important session in terms of the fact that nutrition is a very strong influencer of the health of our nation, and as the speaker said in the morning, that we have a very high rate of economic growth, but correspondingly we have malnutrition rates as good as sub-Saharan Africa, and therefore the two don't match. Why and what needs to be done are big queries, and a lot of work is being done. Also, I'd like to say that nutrition is a space where there's a large number of innovations coming in. At the grassroots level, even in small districts, in small villages, a lot of NGOs are working on innovations in nutrition. So this would be the right forum to discuss this. We are privileged to have with us today on this panel three very eminent experts who have done a lifetime of work in this arena of nutrition, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce them. Dr. Prema Ramachandran. Dr. Prema Ramachandran is the director of the Nutrition Foundation of India. She graduated from Madras Medical College, and prior to this, she also worked with ICMR for 25 years, and where she carried out a number of clinical researches on undernutrition in women, nutrition health, nutrition fertility interactions, nutrition and family welfare services through existing PHCs, primary health infrastructure, and we all know her for her work on anemia, contraception and HIV infection in India. She has over 150 publications in peer-reviewed index journals in these areas. She's worked as advisor to the Planning Commission till 2003. She's also contributed as a member of the Prime Minister's National Council on India's Nutrition Challenges. She has been involved in the evaluation of the midday meal scheme and the nutrition program for adolescent girls. And she's also prepared a number of technical papers for FAO on dual burden of nutrition, food security and agriculture. The list can go on, and words, I think, are too little to express the kind of work she's done. May I request Dr. Ramachandran to give her presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Simon. At the outset, I would like to thank Sambodhi for giving me an opportunity. Usually, we in nutrition circle and we in public health circle, we are two circles we constantly interact, discuss, debate, whatever. But though we believe that we are central to all development of human beings and therefore the center of all developmental agenda all over the world, very often what we believe and what we change and what we think are important, we are not very good in communicating to the other people who matter. We are very good at interpersonal communication. But as a group, to communicate changes in ideas that we had experienced, debated and come to, but later on to tell the world, oh, this is what is happening. Please listen to us, and will you change your policies, programs, processes, products, taking these into consideration. I think it's one thing where we do not have much opportunity, and even the opportunities that we get, somehow we are not very good in communicating it across. So in a way, I was very happy when one more occasion came and we could talk to people who are non-health, non-nutrition, but developmental people to whom we have to communicate and convince. Okay? And if we succeed in this innovation, we will get our due place under the sun. I, for one, am by nature optimist, and in 2000, when the General Assembly of the United Nations, after all the largest gathering of all the country leaders in the world, approved the Millennium Declaration and committing all their nations and the world as a whole to a new global partnership to achieve basic human rights of food, health, education and improvement in quality of life for millions of citizens especially those poor and vulnerable segments living in developing countries. I felt, oh, this millennium and the first century is the time when we are going to change the world. You know, I mean, yes, 15 years down the line, we may have some worries, but I still believe that this is the best opportunity that we had. And today, MDGs have become really the yardstick through which you measure progress. To some extent, by this simple process, giving a checklist, you have forced people to think. And I think that's a good thing. And considered in this fashion, SDGs, which are far more difficult, far more expensive, give far more leeway to the nations themselves to draw up their agenda. It's a more difficult enterprise, but maybe we should really look at it in a slightly more enabled fashion so that we have a greater chances of success. We know that India is a major signatory and we will hopefully take care of both them. Like we did for the MDGs, we would also try to strive and succeed, because the one lesson that we learned from MDGs is that where India and China succeeded, MDGs, the world succeeded. Poverty, 12 years ahead of time, 8 years ahead of time. And where India failed, along with Sub-Saharan Africa, like nutrition, the world was stuck. We were stuck with the world and the world was stuck. I would briefly try to take you through some pathways for the eradication of malnutrition, which the MDG years taught us, which hopefully we will now be able to. Most nutritionists, and especially my kids with whom I have been talking for decades, will know all this is old hat, but not to all. And therefore, I plead for patience from the people who have already heard it so many times. MDG targets, we know that the way they lump it, goal 1 is eradication of extreme hunger and poverty. So, poverty is associated with hunger. And how do you measure hunger? You measure hunger by undernourished people. Does that have a one-to-one correlation? This has been questioned for the last 40 years by nutritionists. We have debated, discussed, and then said, no. Maybe some other indicator of undernutrition, perhaps wasting, would help. Has anybody else heard? No. Reduce child mortality, there is no problem there. Improve maternal health, no problem there. Combat HIV, malaria and other diseases, no problem there. There are very clear-cut goals and that you can strive. As I said earlier, when India and China achieved income poverty reduction of China down to 4%. India, well, not that good, but world moved along with us, and India and China are responsible for world achieving MDG goal of poverty reduction way ahead of the set time frame. And from there, they dared to dream. They wanted sustainable development, end all poverty in all forms. Now it's no longer income poverty, you know, and they wanted to end it by 2030. What can India do? I'll confine myself to income poverty. Currently, India has the highest GDP growth in the world, and unless unforeseen calamities hit us, and hopefully no, they won't, India is expected to keep up the current growth rates for a foreseeable future. It's therefore likely that India will have a reasonably high GDP growth rate, especially with the demographic dividend which will be there in operation for another 15 years, and achieve the ambitious goals of at least poverty curtailment. I'm not sure about elimination even. But how does it translate into the next bit in the SDG? End hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition. As of now, India produces adequate food. Cereal consumption in the poorest income group is on average. The whole problem is the averages. Average does not mean two ends do not exist. And people who are used to measurement technologies will understand this fact. Every time excess and deficient bring you near to a middle path where we look fine. That exists, but average consumption is fine at this moment. So when we say SDG says by 2030 hunger should be eliminated and ensure access by all people, particularly the poor and people in vulnerable situations, including infants, for safe, nutritious, sufficient food all the year round. India can achieve sufficient food to meet hunger needs. The tragedy here is what is considered as food security by economists and agronomists is not what we consider food security. We nutritionists believe, no, we should have adequate. Not only food grains, beginning, yes, food grains, but after that there is pulses, there is vegetables, there are so many things, and then alone. Are we anywhere near that? What we consider? Sorry. But if you are going to look at what is the current definition adapted by global nations, that is food grain security, agronomists assure us that self-sufficiency till 2030 is feasible with climate change, no problem. National Food Security Act, 2/3 subsidized cost. I think even if it is implemented in reasonable framework, it should keep hunger at bay. And we have large food scale supplementation program for the vulnerable groups. So reasonably sure that India can achieve this ambitious goal. And what is the next? Address nutritional needs of infant, adolescent girls, pregnant and lactating women. Again, we have two of the biggest food supplementation program, ICDS and MDM. And to address hidden hunger, we do have a iodine fortification programs. So then again, India will be a front runner, and if only we will effectively implement, not only on scale, but in the most difficult areas by giving appropriate priority to doing it in those places where the needs are greater, then we have every reason to believe we can achieve it. And I would look at Dr. Shridhar, who did it for vitamin A decades ago when I was pleading with her, please, UP mein kar dikha do na. That is what is needed. Kar dikhayenge. And that requires human beings and not anything else. Then we come to undernutrition. As I said earlier, because of South Asia, the world got pulled down. And unless and until we do something about things, we will be called as worse than Sub-Saharan Africa and whatever. And the world cannot move. Either we move the indicator or we stay like, no, we can't achieve undernutrition reduction. Here is Indian data, and what do nutritionists tell you? We have put from same 4 surveys, 1990 to 2050. There has been a decline in stunting, there has been a decline in underweight. Well, we didn't achieve what was projected as 50%. But nutritionists believe that what is worrying and what should move first is the wasting. A thin child, by grandmother's knowledge, is a child which needs more food. Why is it that everybody else will refuse to look at wasting and would always insist we shall be Scandinavians or Ethiopians? We are going to take decades to reach their height, but wasting and plumpness are things that we should act now because their current energy deficit exists. We have this indicator, we have been measuring that indicator, we have been pleading with people, please use this indicator. A plump child should run, a thin child should be fed, or infection should be treated. Weight, underweight, 50% underweight. Why? We are appropriate for our height and age. So this is the problem that I think policy level change. Others should understand. Our inability to communicate is the major problem, which hopefully will be now slowly caught at and corrected. Because this is very important. All forms of malnutrition ending, good God, can any country achieve it? Malnutrition includes under, over, micronutrient. And look at this world. I will not comment. This is the global undernutrition. 15 years you will eliminate it. This is the overnutrition and anemia. What on earth can we do about this? And will overweight developed countries eliminate from their current 30 to 40% to 0% in 15 years? Whom are you talking? We don't have to talk about anemia. That is 2 billion people plus. Eliminate? Come on. So that is at best I can say it's an aspirational, inspirational statement which, political will make that, but come down to earth with technical things, and this is what we are going to have a look. What are that? Achieve internationally agreed goals on stunting and wasting. Thank God underweight has been pushed. But do they really realize what they are talking about? India has stunting, underweight and wasting rates highest in the world. But please look, this small stature doesn't mean household food insecurity. If you are going to look at any data, I am putting it in NFHS3, any data from NNMB, anything else can be looked at. Clearly, the highest income group, families from which we all come, which has not known any poverty for 3-4 generations, we are short. Some of us are. What are you going to do about it? Has it brought cognitive deterioration? Come. India as a whole, 7 to 8 inches shorter. We are the leaders in many intellectual things. So don't raise the bogey. Second, manual labor. Where is manual labor? Our whole tragedy today of overnutrition comes because manual labor is no longer a major thing. Will we not accept it and say, look, we are short. We will eliminate waste. That is our mandate now. Do we have the tool? Yes. Thanks to WHO and our own pediatricians' contribution, we have a MGRS standard, we have a WHO standard. You have as much ability to scientifically identify the thin child and feed it, and plot child and make it true. ICDS can be used for achieving this. MDM can be used to achieve this. It's not at all a problem. New way. School health and ICDS always measured weight and heights. So please treat the high wasting rate that India currently has as an opportunity, exactly the way agricultural people use low productivity as an opportunity to increase agricultural production. Land cannot be manufactured, but productivity can be increased. Wasting is in our hand. We should reverse it. Undernutrition, stunting, give it as a long-term goal. Don't say in 5 years we shall achieve it. And please take overnutrition. India has one of the lowest rates. Please feel happy about it. Keep it low. And does SDG mention it? No. Should we mention it? Of course, yes. And please, this is the message with which I will read. At the moment, do not say we are ashamed of our nutritional status. There are things that can improve. But there is also things from which we can take pride. At the moment, majority of Indian in all age groups, if you use BMI, are normally nourished. Keep it that way. Prevent overnutrition from escalating, reduce undernutrition. We are fine and we will remain healthy and achieve many MDG goals. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for keeping to the time. I won't take much more time. I'll introduce the next speaker, Dr. Sheila Veer. Dr. Sheila Veer is a public health nutrition specialist. She completed her PhD from Queen's University, Belfast in UK. She worked as a nutrition specialist with UNICEF for 20 years, providing strategic and technical leadership in policy formulation, development of program design, and implementation of public health nutrition programs in the country. Since 2007, she is a freelancing senior nutrition consultant and is the founder director of the Public Health Nutrition and Development Center, New Delhi. She is a past secretary of the Nutrition Society of India and was awarded the Srikantayya Memorial Lecture Award 2013 by NSI, and also the Kamlapuri Sabharwal Oration in 2015. She has over 85 publications, and this includes a book titled Public Health Nutrition in Developing Countries, which is a very comprehensive compilation of papers on public health nutrition, and in fact a kind of Bible for students of public health nutrition. Dr. Veer.
I was wondering what I should talk about. The subject is so vast and we have 10 minutes. So I thought I'll focus my presentation on women's nutrition with reference to stunting or childhood nutrition and the nutrition sensitive interventions which we very often forget. Let's look at it within your lens. When we look at poor women's nutrition as per BMI, we see that there is a parallel that we see in India with childhood stunting, but we don't see that in Pakistan, we don't see it in Sri Lanka and Maldives. In fact, these three countries, as Dr. Prema said, our obesity and overweight is much higher. We haven't really studied what is the impact of overweight women on intrauterine IUGR. At least it remains to be studied, because I was looking at low birth weight. There is a parallel association you see, but you don't see it when there is more overweight. In fact, Pakistan new study is showing that out of 160 districts, 67 districts, I think, out of 130 districts, overweight women are more than underweight women. So, or low BMI, undernourished women. Similarly, in Sri Lanka and Maldives, we see a similar scenario. India still has much less overweight, but since Dr. Prema mentioned about it, I think we need to be cautious. If you look at the data of NFH, RSOC, the rapid survey which has come in, wherever there is higher percentage of women with more than 10 standard graduation, higher percentage, we have higher overweight. That doesn't mean education leads to overweight. It leads to decision making possibly. It leads to empowerment of women who then make choices which may not be correct. That is possibly the hypothesis and needs to be seen. Anyway, when we look at the stunting scenario, needless to mention, India leads in terms of numbers, and the WHO goal is in terms of numbers, that we have to have 40% reduction in stunting. Coming to the largest number of stunted children, India has over 30%, almost a third of the global load. Now, trends in stunting, because these are incomparable data, but at the same time, we do see a drop in stunting, but we need a rapid reduction to reach the goal of WHO of 40% reduction in number of children who are stunted. Where have we been not focusing possibly? Okay, again we look at the state-wise data. You will again see the scenario is much better where there is higher education. So we'll come to those points also with reference to stunting. Many of you must be familiar with this graph by now, but again I want to bring to the point that children who are born to undernourished mothers and are underweight have a poor start in life, because almost 50% of stunting is taking place in womb, and almost 30% starting with low birth weight, and these are the children who don't pick up their nourishment faster, and we need to look at them the first 2 years life. In fact, we did a study much before, as somebody was mentioning in the, we forget our own Indian data. Our data in UP showed, which Dr. Prema also mentioned, we were struggling, and it showed that we did do monthly study of the data that came out in UP, and we found that the first 2 years of life were the worst and were window of opportunity. But till some international organization mentioned it, we did not really focus, because sometimes you do earlier you come up with some statement, but that doesn't get accepted, especially in nutrition field, till the international scientists start supporting it for some reason. So then we come to this stunting. This is occurring again, coming to the fact that child has to have a good start in life. This is an interesting slide. What I'm really trying to say here is the highest risk factors, the regression analysis of the available national data in India, in Bangladesh and Nepal shows that no education of mothers has the highest risk factors. Maternal height came as a risk factor. Mothers with no institutional delivery, a proxy I would say for health services, came up as a problem. And households with low standard of living, again water, sanitation, etc. and no toilet facilities. These were the highest risk factors for stunting in children. The ones in marked in red show the association with factors which are related to the mother. Bangladesh, even domestic violence, decision-making power is related, but I'm just the one in red, sorry, they are the ones which are common across. Maternal height again comes, which is again a cumulative effect of the lifetime care of women. Secondary education, wealth quintile, and in Nepal also maternal height comes in as the first risk factor, highest score. Water, open defecation, born in hospital, and maternal education. Again, it shows that when we really look at stunting and when we want to reduce stunting, we'll have to look at these factors which we need to really address. And there are a lot of programs which are going on even for girls completing secondary education. I think we need to look in these issues in the terms of even improving nutrition. Coming to major pathways of stunting, as you can see, life cycle approach, inadequate pregnancy, poor birth outcome, we all talk about, increase in low birth weight leading to high incidence of stunting. Similarly, poor child care 0 to 24 months, we are giving focus, infant and young child feeding, proper care practices, sanitation, hygiene, water, etc. Making a difference there. Adolescent care, we talk about it, we don't do much about it at the moment. And we have reduction in nutritional size and early marriage, etc. affecting it. And poor care during preconception of newlyweds. This was another program which we had been included, the newlyweds preconception that we talk now about taking care before they end, so that they enter pregnancy healthy. At least they don't, at least we catch them little earlier than pregnancy. So, but in India, we are fortunate that most of the pregnancies at least occur after marriage. So even if we take care of recording the newlyweds and follow them up till they become pregnant, I think we would make a difference. And that group we need to also include in our program when we are designing programs. Interestingly, yes, we are all concerned about health sector looking into it. I was sitting here and listening to public health interventions, innovations that were talked about. None of the speakers talked about nutrition issues, even in maternal care, maternal health. The only thing the health people which they have registered and are talking are exclusive breastfeeding. But I think we need to or early initiation of breastfeeding, to be very precise. I think they are the ones who can make a difference in including maternal nutrition even during pregnancy care. I think it's very important, and I think when health leads the way, the programs do take off in our country. So I think I need to convince the public health experts here in their innovations to include maternal nutrition, care of newlyweds, because newlyweds in a village would be about 4 or 5 coming into a village. It's not difficult for an Asha to find out who is a newlywed Bahu who has come and how to take care that she's not anemic when she enters pregnancy. She has to improve her food intake. It can be done. It's not poverty which is causing the problem. It's very often lack of information, she thinks she must take iron tablets only when she becomes pregnant. Ashas can make a difference. These are the essential nutrition interventions which we keep talking about. We have a long way to go. So we have to, in fact, 100% coverage, and I have got these bars of various interventions. Again, it shows that we are far behind in iron and folic acid consumption. It has been very convenient for us to say, actually, iron and folic acid is not well tolerated, it's not taken by mothers, but we have not made a serious effort in promoting consumption of iron and folic acid. If we look at the data of supply and consumption, we do see that the gap is narrow where the supply and consumption. But if supply itself is inadequate, naturally consumption will be less. But I think we also need to get away from this mindset that of its adverse effects only, do we tell a mother of its impact on the fetus, Do we tell a mother of its own health? We do to some extent, but we only talk about nausea and black stools. We need to really be serious about it, and I think again, health can show us the way. I think health sector has to come in a much bigger way, not to leave it to ICDS. Now I'll come straight to the point because I've been given only 10 minutes for my presentation. So we have to look at the constraints on women's resources when we look at in terms of resources for improving nutrition of women, because these are not only, access to health is also a resource. Care of women with no domestic violence is also a resource. Living in a happy environment is also a resource. So in fact, when we look at improving the maternal nutrition, we'll have to take the nutrition specific interventions along with the nutrition sensitive interventions, we are calling, which are the underlying factors. So we will, so what I have listed here about is the increase in nutrition interventions with reference to increase in maternal weight, in improving situation of iron status, micronutrient deficiencies, poor hormone stay, and then it comes the nutrition sensitive intervention which affects empowerment of women. For example, let me give an example. We are only concentrating on health in ICDS. Today we have a very big program called National Rural Livelihood Mission, and NRLM program actually gives a lot of scope. I went to southern India, saw the programs, and village organizations are so well established. Women are making money through the income generating schemes, and they are also producing, for example, complementary feeds for ICDS. But when you go and ask the workers themselves who are producing this, of the practices they follow for self-care and infant and young child feeding, they are not even aware. So where is the gap? Again, we have not been able to link up the caring practices of women and children with the income generating activities. Offers a lot of scope. There is scope, and government is very open to linking up NRLM, which looks at a lot of nutrition sensitive issues. Gender inequality is looked in, domestic violence is looked in, and in fact, I'm not going to get into the data for each of the nutrition sensitive factors. We have enough literature today which provides evidence on how it impacts. There are pathways are not clear for some. For example, domestic violence. Yes, we know unhappiness will lead to poor care, but it also talks about metabolism getting affected. It also has a lot of issues being still raised because we are not very clear about the pathways. But still, there is a lot of work on it, and we need to really make a dent on nutrition sensitive issues as much as we talk of direct nutrition interventions. And we have to go through the entire cycle of women. Yes, I agree, it's a long-term stunting but at the same time, I think we cannot really, when we look at the data of gender and nutritional status, we don't see a difference in male and female children under the age of 5. But we have to continue looking after them in adolescence. Their age of marriage, their age of concern, we can make a difference in that because height is obstructed, velocity of growth is much slower in the rural areas or in underprivileged families than in privileged families. And if they get married early and we are really obstructing their height and growth. So for these interventions, we have to go through the life cycle. I'm not going to get into details of that at the moment. So the future challenges is we have to have the direct nutrition interventions of care of women. If we are doing institutional delivery and we are improving the antenatal care to over 80%, mothers coming for, at least getting registered for ANC, good antenatal coverage. What about taking the weight of women when they are during pregnancy? What about encouraging them to have a better diet? It's not all of them are poor and they can't eat diversified food. I'm sure we will make a difference. And similarly for anemia, etc., which are the direct interventions. And we need to reach the marginalized ST families, lower wealth index group, urban slum. Again, here I look at NRLM as a great scope of mapping families which are not being reached by health sector or ICDS. Let them bring them together and work on it and identify those families. Increasing influence on nutrition, influencing factors like poverty, women empowerment, high school education. We have programs for this, and I'm very optimistic it will show results soon. And of course, reaching the newlyweds in and preconception stage. These are challenges. And we have to reduce the rate of reduction much faster than what it is to about 3.4%. And we can only achieve this by coupling direct nutrition interventions with nutrition sensitive interventions, linking of the PDS, PHED, which is for water sanitation, NREGA, and these are all happening. We don't have to do a convergence planning. I'm not a believer of that you do a multi-sector convergence district planning. You have to create demand, and these services from the vertical sectors do converge at the village or family level or within the cluster of villages when you create demands for these services. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Mr. Basanta Kumar Kar. Mr. Basanta Kumar Kar is currently working as a senior advisor in the Coalition for Food and Nutrition Security, the largest coalition of its kind in the country. Mr. Kar has been selected for the prestigious 2016 Global Transform Nutrition Champion for South Asia Award. He is co-convening the Regional Transform Nutrition Leader Network. He is an international development professional having excellent leadership management skills and has a broad experience of building institutions, managing large country and regional programs with demonstrable results. Mr. Kar has been a member of numerous policy and advisory bodies. He is adept at influencing a wide range of policy and legislations in South Asia. Previously, he's worked with organizations like NDDB, CARE, ActionAid, and GAIN. Mr. Kar is going to talk about an important issue of institutionalization of the nutrition sector. And over to you.
Thank you so much, madam. It is also lunch time. Nutrition time. Whenever we come across, we heard from our eminent speakers like Prema madam, Sheila madam, they are very known people in nutrition sector in the country. But whenever we want to ensure the success or the impact or the program delivery effectiveness, then the role of the institution comes. And in the morning we heard many times about the political will. And in India, you must have heard about the recent National Nutrition Mission, which has got 360 crore budget, which has been approved in this budget session. Also, many states are coming up with state food commissions based on the National Food Security Act. Apart from that, many states have also state missions, Maharashtra, UP, and many states. Also, since we have been working in the villages, there are Gram Sabhas, village level committees, district level committees. So, we thought that we need to have a discussion and deliberations and debates about which institutions and how the institutions work to create impact at scale. In country, in 2003, you found, all of us saw Vajpayee government setting up National Nutrition Mission. Something happened after 7 years. I found magic in 6-7 years. Something happens in our country. We do not understand. 2010, Manmohan Singh government brought out Nutrition Council. Then just after 6-7 years, we are getting another mission. So whether these missions, councils are sustainable or there are any other ways. Before I come to that, I want to run through the data about 58 countries, which also was discussed and shared in the presentation of Prema madam and Shiva madam. What are those structures about? Afghanistan, it is just managed by health department. Bangladesh, there is a council headed by the Prime Minister. There is a political will, and Prime Minister is member of the scaling of nutrition movement, lead group. And you look at the data, there are many things to tell, but open defecation data in Bangladesh is only 1%. Benin, president is leading, open defecation is 1%. They are pioneer in many ways. Burkina Faso, there is also a concern, also has a political will. Burundi, Vice President is leading nutrition. Cambodia, Deputy Prime Minister, Cambodia we know. Cameroon, Prime Minister. Chad, Prime Minister. Comoros, Vice President. The countries we must have not read about, thought about, there is also a political will. That I wanted to share. DRC, Prime Minister, it is very difficult to read out everything, but it will be shared. But Ethiopia, also there is a council, and 7 or 8 ministries are working on El Salvador, National Council, Ghana, Vice President, Guatemala, President, Guinea, Prime Minister, India, there is a proposal. No, it is reality.
Yeah.
Indonesia, Multi-Ministerial Steering Committee. Kenya, Nutrition Integration Coordination Committee. Look at Lesotho, Prime Minister. Laos, Prime Minister. Malawi, President, very conflict hit country. And generally we ignore countries like Chad, Malawi, is not it? Mali, Prime Minister. So you are reading. Then Senegal, under the Prime Minister's office. Sierra Leone, Vice President. South Sudan, multi-sectoral platform at the Prime Ministerial level. South Sudan, completed. We don't want to work there. Sri Lanka, data also was shared by Madam. Presidential Secretariat. Sri Lanka outnumbers, in South Asia in many ways. Tanzania, under the Prime Minister's office. Yemen, Minister of Planning and International Cooperation. Uganda, under the Prime Minister's office. These are the data of the 58 countries. So when you go through this data, 2-3 headlines are coming, 2-3 messages are coming. One is certainly the political will. Certainly the ministerial commitment, the political pledge. The second thing, in many countries, Ministry of Health is leading the nutrition. Another interesting development you find on this data is, even if Ministry of Health is leading, there is a trend, growing trend in many countries to set up Department of Nutrition, Division on Nutrition, or Special Directorate of Nutrition. So what I wanted to share, there is a growing trend on giving importance to nutrition, and you know why there is a trend and why nutrition is important. I think all of you know, because nutrition has a power to empower the present and future generation. Nutrition has a power to transform our GDP to make it double digit. Nutrition also can make our Skill India, Stand Up India, and many other programs, flagship programs, realize properly. So in this backdrop, another.
Yes, sure.
There is another place.
Can the IT person just help us?
Yeah. So in this backdrop, Coalition for Food and Nutrition Security, where I work, we organized a policy seminar on 13th April, and we try to understand, discuss, deliberate, debate about what could be the institutional arrangement in India, starting from Gram Sabha to Lok Sabha. Okay. So definitely we discussed about the political will, and one such political will, we have been talking about nutrition mission. If you talk in this country with anyone in nutrition or food security sector, they will always talk about mission. Our thinking is quite linear. So whether that mission or a commission is the only answer, or is there any other way we can establish nutritional mechanisms at village level, at also national level. Very interesting recommendations we brought out. We are sharing those papers to you for your feedback. The hard copy also will share. Look at national level. There are 6 cabinet committees in India, and you know one such cabinet committee is Cabinet Committee on Foods, Cabinet Committee on Security. So we thought it will be wise for Government of India to establish a Cabinet Committee on Food and Nutrition Security. And under the Cabinet Committee, we suggested that there has to be one Executive Council which has to be chaired by Cabinet Secretary, because it needs a dedicated political will. And nutrition mission or council may come and go, but Cabinet committees generally does not go. Then we do not have any parliamentary forum on nutrition. So we suggested that there has to be a parliamentary forum on nutrition, food security, and also WASH. There, I think within a year or two, almost all states will come up with state food commissions. If there are 20, 30 state food commissions, what is the topic structure? Nothing is mentioned in National Food Security Act. We suggested that there has to be a National Food and Nutrition Mission, Food and Nutrition Commission, which will also provide oversight to state food commissions. And state food commissions, for your information, has a mandate to monitor supplementary nutrition, midday meal, PDS, and it will be the only quasi-judicial body, most powerful regulatory structure in the country in next few months and years. We also suggested that there has to be a directorate on food and nutrition. We suggested about the Indian Council for Nutrition and Food Research, like Indian Council of Medical Research, but nothing is there on nutrition. National Biosafety Authority, when you talk to many policymakers, they told about nutrition is not about meeting your protein, energy, malnutrition or filling your stomach. It is more about country security, stability, integrity. There are many untold stories which we may not discuss here, but it has certainly linked with India's security. So we need a biosafety authority. We don't know what will happen if people start consuming genetically modified food, and what will happen to India's existence after 50 years. So we need to have certain mechanisms. For tribal, they are most vulnerable. Sickle cell anemia is also widespread. So we thought that there has to be a National Center of Excellence on tribal nutrition. Similarly, we discussed about what could be at state level, what could be at district level, and what could be at village level. But most interestingly, we thought the best person and the institution which can work not at village but at hamlet level is nutrition change leaders. My experience in working in many Indian states, also in Bangladesh and many countries, shows that they are the real heroes or heroines. They can bring change. They can address left out, drop out, exclusion, and change behavior. So we thought every hamlet should have a nutrition leader, preferably a woman. And because in a country like Bangladesh, when we are working, we are suggesting them the village leaders. But India's structure, it is not a monolithic. Caste issues are there, class issues there. So hamlet approach is the most important approach, relevant approach for country. And if we could bring one leader in each hamlet, we can transfer nutrition sector and bring impact. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm extremely grateful to my speakers for keeping to time. We have time for 2 or 3 questions. Is there anybody who would like to have a question or comment? Can you share the mic here in the front, please?
Actually, you said that what was important is having a political will and to give enough importance to nutrition to form a department or something. But the last Nutrition Council was headed by the Prime Minister, and in many years it just had a meeting or 2 meetings, I think, during the entire duration at the most. So I think the political will was there. It didn't translate into an effective action was another thing. And when it comes to giving due importance, we do have a ministry. So I would like to understand what is it that we are asking for, since we have these 2 already in place, but it hasn't made a big difference. And if we are talking of more commissions, councils, missions, do you think there will be more dissonance in terms of policy and direction? That everyone at every level will be speaking in a different voice, coming up with something different, and there will be so much, parallel, discourse on this subject that, we will possibly not have a clear direction where we are moving. So just, wanted to know your thoughts on this.
I think your analysis and apprehension is quite correct. Because in India we have seen what I shared, 3 structures in law from 2003. Nutrition Mission, Bajpayee government also set up. council, Manmohan Singh government also set up in 2010, and this government is going to set up another mission. So through our analysis, what we realize, such missions and or councils, unless it is backed by certain mechanisms or legislative mandate, then it becomes typical party will, not a political will. One is party will, the second is political will, the third is whether there is a legislative and other backings. So keeping in view of our past experience, keeping in view of other country evidences, we are suggesting you can have a nutrition mission, but we are suggesting if there could be a cabinet committee on food and nutrition security, that will be more sustainable structure, number one. Number two, yes, if there are many institutions, there will be conflict. It is also true, but we cannot deny the mandate under the National Food Security Act. Anyway, the Act is going to set up state food commissions, which is a quasi-judicial body like Women Commission or Information Commission. Odisha is the first state to set up such commission. 21 states who have now implemented Food Security Act are going to bring that because of the pressure from the Supreme Court. So what we discussed, it is going to happen whether we say it or not. So what will be the national apex body which will try to provide that oversight? That is one. The third thing which, Madam, we are saying, political will is not only at Prime Minister level. Political will is best manifested if there is a will of Gram Sabha, Panchayat, because that is the local government. So here, what I wanted to say, there has to be lot of thinking about institutional arrangement starting from Gram Sabha to Lok Sabha.
Thank you. Any other question? Can I take the liberty? Okay, sure, please.
You were saying that convergence planning is not needed, or is it needed?
What I really meant was you don't have to sit and do a convergence planning.
Okay.
In the sense for a nutrition program. What you really need to, you understand you need to orient the other sectors and let the sectors work in their own sectoral way to achieve those goals in that specific area. You know, very often now we have started talking a block level plan, of multi-sectoral plan. I think that may have its, because I have tried it in Agra district once. You have the very junior people from district who come and sit in the district planning meeting for a multi-sectoral and who don't have any say. But they really were very well sensitized. We oriented them, we sent them to the field to find out lots of things. They came back and said, yes, their sector could make a difference. But we said, okay, the new sector, for example, needs to do open defecation, has to be reduced. Yes, you work on it, and we have concentrated in these villages or these pockets that we have identified, even for malnutrition, because you are making a difference. Don't sit and do a multi-sectoral plan, because that's not going to really roll out that way. That's what I meant. You do need multi-sectoral participation.
Thank you. Last question. Okay, maybe I'll just sum it up very briefly, because I know everybody's waiting for lunch. I think today our session was really looking at new ways of looking at old problems, which somebody mentioned in the last session, and that's what we've done. Dr. Prema gave us a very realistic, ground reality based picture on what we can achieve and what we cannot achieve. And let's not be very optimistic and idealistic about things. An important issue which crept up from Dr. Veer's presentation is that preconceptual, just after marriage counseling. I think that's where we have to start. The fact that we are not able to change low birth weight rates or infant mortality rates may stem from the fact that the mother herself is malnourished. And we only wake up when the mother comes registered for pregnancy. So it's very important to go beyond those 1,000 days and maybe make it even earlier. Accountability and institutionalization is another big issue which we've always been talking about. And in fact, something which often crops up in our discussions in the nutrition circle is that we have had programs like ICDS and midday meal for the last 40 years, and yet our malnutrition rates are so high. So let's think of what has gone wrong, let's innovate. Is it really necessary to carry on the old format, or is there something we can do to change it? I mean, we really need to give a serious thought to that, because it's all over the country, it's a large amount of resources being spent, and I don't think the corresponding values are coming out of it. So we really need a lot of innovations in those areas. Of course, the idea about existing convergence, which ma'am has mentioned, is very, very important also, rather than sitting and building up new ways and new channels of multi-sectoral convergence, to use the existing platforms and the existing infrastructure to achieve what we want to. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to all the three speakers for this very interesting session. Thank you very much.